So left hand one was kind of one of the first 2 or 3 you did. And we said before, it's kind of, I guess, a characteristic of your swing where there's a window where your hands and arms need to sort of swing down. On occasions, you swing it too far out this side, and sometimes you whip it too far inside. So that's just being aware, okay, where's my hands? And he said you've got those sort of checkpoint, which says sort of the club over your toe line and your hands going over that toe kind of thing to give you a feeling, okay? But this one here on the left-hand side, we can see as you go back, sort of pushing the hands out when he moves. There we go, so your hands are going out and away, they're away from the body. The club at sort of halfway back now is kind of outside your hands and just moving on a very steep angle away from the ball. So if you were to come back that way, the club's going to swing so far across that you're putting your arm in here, thinning it, possibly chunking it because you're coming down quite steep, or you redirect as the club then comes back on a different line. It's in the outside the hands, but the hands kind of moved in here. Then you get that kind of toe-y strike, as we'll see when we come in a real sort of off the toe of the club there, and mat first, and then your hands have got nowhere to go, so it sort of just like goes and sort of just pulled into the body. It looked a bit awkward, as we said. And the natural real kind of arc of your hand is that when you did the one arm swing, is that your arms kind of just goes here from the shoulders, nice and loose and nice and relaxed, and the hands and arms, or the hand is just the left-handed swing, followed that kind of gentle curve. So as this club goes back now, you can see the club now just working back on that gentle line. There's your 10 yard, 20 yard, 30 yard. Want to go more? Just goes a bit further back in terms of the swing back, okay? As you then start coming down, the club now you can see is coming back down, same sort of line. Good strike of the golf ball and turning through. That pulling a little bit to the left will probably be something you sort of have a little bit for a little while maybe, but over time you'll realise actually I'm going to start swinging my arm towards target. I don't need to kind of suck it in there. If your backswing, however, is better, if you pull your arms in, you'll catch it a bit toey. Not the end of the world. Maybe a little thin. That's some of the shots you've hit there where you've been a bit cleaner gone. Although that's a good shot now, in time that'll become well, I wasn't quite as good a stroke I wanted to. It might have gone 5 yards too far or 5 yards too short or a bit to the left, okay? If that is your kind of little characteristic, yeah? But as long as the backswing and the arms work back here, any kind of just like whoop, this way, okay, you might deaden the strike a little bit. And in some ways, as you might get really, really skilled with these shots, you can actually utilise that kind of almost like toey dead strike to kind of soften the landing and soften the shot. So if you're playing a real sort of delicate lofted shot, you want the ball to come down real soft this way, get your most lofted club, play this kind of like toey kind of strike, the ball comes out a bit dead and down that way. So it's a bit of sort of playability with that you may down the line if you get to. But at least in terms of this swing now, if the hands and arms are kind of swinging under your shoulders on a natural plane or natural path, your strike there now is going to be far more consistent. And again, when you're playing, it's this weekend and when you are next playing, just look at that kind of 40 to 60 yard range. I think round the green you seem pretty comfortable because it's almost like a putting stroke now. There's no kind of thought of the club going out here for a small shot, so you kind of naturally sort of swing that club back on the normal arc, and as you go back, just be careful with any of these shots. We're not trying to whip it inside with the wrists or push it outside with the arms, okay? The hand and arms are sort of just going to go back on a natural sort of angle of this curve.
That middle ground, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Muck around with a stiff and then I'll flick, but then it tends to kind of...
And that's what I think. And if you look at, in some ways, throughout your sort of your golf career, I suppose, you've always had a sort of a situation where either your hands go outside here or your club whips inside there. And then eventually when you played it over and over again, you kind of got pretty good at doing that. You kind of figure out where the club came back down to impact, where the hands need to be. And on long shots, if the club is travelling sort of way up here, you've got a bit of time when you can sort of manipulate the golf club and get it back into kind of the slot, shall we say. When you're only going back sort of 6 foot, you haven't got time. It's like the ball's back on you before you even know it. It's, oh, hang on a second, it's gone. And especially on shots where you're trying to control the distance, it's not 100%, it's not a full swing. You go, well, how far am I going back? More thought comes into that, and then you start missing greens. And for a 50, 40, 60 yard shot, you'd hope just hit the green. It's not a shot that you go, oh, well, that's... Ooh. If I said, oh, we're starting 3 irons from a hanging light at the rough on the 10th on the Mac and knock them on the green from 200 yards, you go, it's a bit tricky, that is. Which, yeah, okay, fine, we'd agree with that. But pitching the ball 50 yards, especially as someone like yourself who's a reasonable golfer, I mean, you can hit the golf ball. I mean, you can hit it 200 yards. So surely... provisional, not professional, yeah. You could hit 200 yards. So surely, if I can hit 200 yards, I can hit the ball 50 yards. And that, I think, is the frustration sometimes, isn't it?
Driving up and I was thinking, it's just a silly question. I was thinking, in terms of golf, it's unopposed, everything is stationary, under control. I was thinking, a silly question, but it's almost like, why aren't more people better Because if I'm just practicing, I know it's my body, but
Yeah.
there's no external, you know, we're not in a game of football trying to react to things.
You just use the word, the reason why, react. When a ball comes to you in football, tennis, rugby, hockey, basketball, it's a moving ball, isn't it? When that ball's stationary, you can't react, you think more, and you get in your own way. And that is going back to that thing, except that guy who was Mr. Analytical, he'd walking down the range, when the boy just did that, and just hit it. He didn't have time to react, he didn't have time to think, he just reacted. And the strikes he actually gave were pretty good. So for me, and this is what I think we discussed in the past before, when you're on the golf course, I don't mind. Again, there are people who are analytical. There are people who are just like, well, I don't care, whatever, hit it, a bit more blasé, should we say. Whatever you are, you've got to be that. You can't change it on the golf course. Oh, I'm going to stop being this analytical guy and just give it a whack and don't care. However, I want you to think this side of that yellow line. So you're back behind the golf ball, doing some practice swings, looking at the shot. And in some ways, I like people to be more thoughtful and think more. I don't go, oh, I think too much. I said, no, you don't. He went, I think way too much. I don't know. You don't think too much. You think in the wrong spot. You're over the golf ball thinking of 25 different things, and while that club's going back, you've got 15 different swing thoughts. That's thinking in the wrong position, not thinking too much. If you're back there now, you look at the tall players with their caddies, they're going, okay, right, how far have we got to go? So when you're back behind that yellow line on here, we're going, okay, right, how far's the shot? How far's it playing? Is it uphill, downhill? You're playing a 50-yard shot to the 17th on the button. It's a very different 50-yard shot to the 15th on the button, isn't it? Going uphill, downhill. One you're trying to land at like 20 yards, one you're landing at 49 yards. Okay? So there's different thoughts there. When you're back there now, you're doing your practice swings. You're looking at the shot. You're looking at this into wind or downwards. It crosswinds. Out of the rough. Is the lie good?
Once you cross it, you fall.
Once exactly, you walk into it. You put the club down. You don't even think about the shot. 1, 2, 3, bang and hit it. Just and the movement and the practice you've done in all the times you've been doing it, just come to the fore. And you, as you said, you react. Okay? If you had in other sports time to think, the only time in football players have time to think is that walk from the halfway line to the penalty spot in a penalty shootout. And look how crap they sometimes are, yeah? They're awful. Okay? If that ball was kind of passed across them, they just stood there and the ball was kind of, had to try and kick it, they'd probably rock it in top corner. When that ball's put down there, they've got to stand back, look at the ref. Okay, referee, can I go yet, please? You see their face, they're like, oh my God, what's going on? They're looking at the ref who's doing all of them, the goalkeeper who's dancing on the goal to try and put them off. They're thinking, and you can see their brain just gets in their own way. And some of the kicks we saw in the Euros, obviously, some of them are very impressive, obviously, but some of them are like, oh my word, these guys are like multi-millionaire football players, the best in the world, and they're missing a 15 or however big the goal is target. So the reactions in some ways, when in golf, as you said, there's nothing to stop you doing everything perfectly, but the problem is we overthink it when we're on the golf course. Yeah? That kind of make sense, yeah?
Sure.
Good.